Okay, so the question that actually, when Shirley asked me to speak, I said, well, what would you like me to speak about? And she said, gays and transgenders. So I said, okay, gays and transgenders. Okay, let's see what Judaism has to offer in that regard. But she said, well, don't put it in the title. Let them think it's going to be something else. So we called it, Is Judaism Compatible with the 21st Century? And I chose that title because it seems to me anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the 21st century has become a little bit obsessed with sexuality, gender, identity politics, as it's called. And this seems to be the issue of the 21st century. And so we need to address that. I speak to you, most of you know who I am anyway, but for those of you who don't, and for those of you who might listen to the recording at some other point who don't know who I am a Jew. I am ostensibly an Orthodox Jew with a capital O. I don't like that title. I don't like that grouping. I don't like to group Jews. I would prefer to use the word authentic Judaism as opposed to Orthodox Judaism. And you'll understand that in a minute, I hope, when I carry on in this vein. And I suppose I'm speaking to you with a rabbi's hat on, although, again, I would like to think that what I'm saying is not rabbinic, but is sensitive Jewish. Now, why don't I like the title Orthodox? Because Orthodox is a fairly modern expression. The title of Orthodoxy only came into being when Reform Judaism came into being. Before Reform Judaism which began in the late 18th and 19th centuries, there was no such thing as Orthodox Judaism. There was just Judaism, and that was it. When Reform Judaism came into being, then those who opposed Reform Judaism needed to identify themselves as different from Reform Judaism, and the term Orthodoxy was coined. Then there were other different groupings that needed to find names and needed to find homes, if you like. Conservative Judaism came into being. The word conservative we think of as being traditional and sort of rather stuffy, as opposed to progressive. Conservative, I suppose, is the other end of the spectrum to progressive. Now, compared to Orthodox Judaism, conservative Judaism is not conservative at all. But compared to Reform Judaism, conservative Judaism is conservative, which is why it became conservative, because there were Reform Jews who were not happy with the degree and the level to which Reform Judaism reformed itself. And so they became the conservative wing, if you like, of Reform Judaism. Now, all of those titles, Reform, Liberal, Progressive, Masorti, Conservative, Orthodox, Ultra-Orthodox, these are all, to my mind, divisive labels. I don't like any of them. And by virtue of need, I would have to place myself in the modern Orthodox camp, but I don't like any of those labels. The label that I prefer to use, or the expression I prefer to use, is authentic Judaism. And the reason that I've given you that little introduction in terms of groupings, labelings, whatever you want to call them, is because this is really fundamental to the topic that we're going to discuss.
Sorry, before you start, do you want interruptions, or would you rather me wait till right at the end?
I don't mind interruptions at all. I think I'd prefer a hand up so that I don't, so that I can, carry on with the sentence, and then and then stop at the end of the sentence, because I've got to the age where if I stop in the middle of a sentence, I haven't a clue what I was going to finish off with. So yeah, I'm very happy for interruptions as you go along. Either stick your, if you can put the hand up icon, because I can't see everybody on the screen. So there'll be some people who may be on a different screen that I can't see with waving at me frantically. But if you put your little hand up icon, if those of you who know how to do that, then that would be good. And then I can stop and invite you to ask questions or comment. And if you don't know how to do that, and you can wave a bit, and if I don't answer you, I don't see you, then just interrupt anyway. Okay. So Lynn, what would you like to say?
I mean, it may be my ignorance, but I've never heard Orthodox Judaism defined as authentic Judaism. And
sorry, Lynn, you froze then. We missed the vital bit. You've never heard?
Or I've never heard Orthodox Judaism defined or called authentic Judaism. And I think if I belonged to one of the other streams, I would actually be quite disturbed, because as soon as you call it authentic Judaism, it immediately means that no other stream is authentic. And I might agree with that, but many other people would find it disturbing.
You misunderstood me. I wasn't saying, I apologize if I wasn't clear. I wasn't saying that Orthodox Judaism equals authentic Judaism. I was saying that I do not like to use the term Orthodox to describe the kind of Judaism that I want and enjoy to practice. I am looking for a Judaism which to me feels authentic. Okay. Now, in other words, I happened to be somebody who other people would place probably in a modern Orthodox grouping. I am shunning all of those titles, and I am looking for authentic Judaism. Now, how I define authentic Judaism may be different to the way you do it and the way other people do it. So please forgive me if that was what you understood. I was not saying that Orthodox Judaism is authentic Judaism. In many ways, I don't think that Orthodox Judaism is authentic Judaism. My own view is that ultra-Orthodox Judaism is far from authentic Judaism. Okay, that's just my particular view. So I was not saying that Orthodox Judaism is authentic Judaism necessarily, nor is it the only version of authentic Judaism. What I was saying was the expression that I like to use for the kind of Judaism I'm looking for and the kind of Judaism I try to practice is authentic Judaism. And I will give you an example, and then I'll come to Sharon, who's got her hand up. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. When it came to Pesach a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to try and be as authentic as possible at Pesach. And so therefore I went and found the matzot rakot, the soft matzot, which are like lafas, which the Iraqi Jews use. We don't use, the Ashkenazim don't tend to use it, but I wanted to do that because I felt that that was more authentic. That was the kind of matzah that the Jews probably had when they went out of Mitzrayim. They certainly didn't have those crispy crackers that we Ashkenazim have on our table. So I wanted to go and be authentic about it. And so I was in search of an authentic Judaism, and that's what I did. So I'm sorry if that's a long-winded answer, but it's important that you raised that issue, Lynn, because that was not my intention to label Orthodox Judaism as authentic or the only authentic Judaism. Yes, Sharon.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for making this this address to us tonight. I'm concerned, I don't want to go off the derech here, but my family were involved in the founding of the conservative movement in America. And indeed, that family were the establishers of the Borough Park Yeshiva and the Borough Park Synagogue. And they were had a halakhically observant a home as you have, or more so, and were very traditional, but they had a different philosophical view toward how to deal with science and history, and also how to what should be the ways of arbitrating halakha.
Show them my picture. What must I press to show them my picture? They're asking me for.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
And I don't want to argue with you, but I think that having grown up inside that movement and having seen all the family members who were involved, I'm not sure that you are accurate.
Okay, well, again, I think you've misunderstood what I was saying. Maybe I'm not being very clear tonight. What I was saying was that the name conservative Judaism was taken because of the founding members not wishing to be reform, and that not wishing to throw their hat in, if you like, with the reform movement, and yet not feeling comfortable with mainstream Judaism. But anyway, we're going off the point a little bit, but it's important that we understand where we're coming from. Now, I want to talk about the Jewish position on homosexuality and transgenderism, as I was asked to do. And the first thing that we have to say is that there are verses in the Torah which make it very clear that certain things are forbidden and certain things are not forbidden, or are not mentioned as being forbidden. Now, the reason that I started this talk with a discussion about the various different groupings is that what is in the Torah is accepted or not accepted as being of divine origin in a different way by different groups. Now, when I say that I'm of divine origin, I mean given by God to Moshe at Har Sinai. Now, if I share you my screen right now, you will see over here a discussion. Somebody give me a thumbs up when you can see my screen, please. Okay, you will see that this is titled "This Entire Torah That Is in Our Possession." This is a discussion about the articles of faith presented by the Rambam, Maimonides, who lived in the 12th century. Rambam, or Maimonides, has as one of his 13 fundamentals of belief, 13 fundamentals of Judaism, over here. We shall believe that this entire Torah that is in our possession today is the Torah that was given to Moshe, and that it was transmitted in its entirety directly from the Almighty. Now, that is a pretty unequivocal statement by the Rambam, which is accepted by Orthodox Jews as being a given, that the Torah was given by God to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, at Har Sinai. And of course, it is that fundamental that separates various different groupings. So if, for example, we look at the Reform response to whether the Torah is divine in origin, you will see over here, this is from the Pittsburgh platform of 1885 of Reform Judaism in America. We recognize in the Bible the record of the consecration of the Jewish people to its mission as the priest of the one God, and value it as the most potent instrument of religious and moral instruction. And it goes on to say that the Reform movement do not necessarily accept that the Torah was given by God. It was inspired by God, and written by man. And that makes a big difference. The conservative Judaism is somewhere in between. There are certain conservative congregations who will believe in the divine origin, and there are others who believe in Bible criticism, that it was written by a number of people inspired by God over a period of time. Now, the reason that I've highlighted that is because if you accept the Rambam's approach that the Torah was given directly from God through Moshe, and that the Torah that we have in our possession today is exactly the same Torah that was given to us from God, then what is in the Torah becomes immutable. You can't change it. And if there are things in the Torah which don't appear to be compatible with the 21st century, then we have to find a way of making it compatible without changing the Torah. Because one way of making it compatible is to say that these laws in the Torah are no longer valid because they don't fit in today's society. Today's society, 3,500 years later, is different. In some ways, it's more sophisticated. In some ways, it's more scientific, and what have you. And therefore, there are things in the Torah which don't fit anymore, and therefore we can discard them. Well, you can't do that if you believe in the Rambam's principles of faith. And so you have to look at it in a different way. So let me take you now to straight away to the verses which gives us the difficulty in Orthodox Judaism with our attitude to the homosexual act. And I make a distinction straight away between the homosexual act and the homosexual person, the homosexual tendency, the attraction of one person to another person of the same gender. Because the Torah says in Sefer Vayikra, in the Sedra of Achrei Mot, as clear as you could possibly get it, in the Hebrew, Et Zachar lo tishkav mishkavei isha toiva hi. Translated here on the screen for you, verse 23. Sorry, I beg your pardon, verse 22. You shall not lie down with a male as with a woman. This is an abomination. And that's what the Torah says. And here it is talking about the homosexual act. This is, by the way, from the Sedra of Achrei Mot. It is the reading of the Torah for Yom Kippur afternoon at Mincha, as well as being from the Sedra of Achrei Mot. There is another verse also in the book of Leviticus in Vayikra, chapter 20, and this is also explicit. A man who lies with a male as one would with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. Mot yumatu demehem bam. They shall be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. That is the source for the death penalty for a homosexual act. Of course, as with any death penalty in the Torah, it depends on having witnesses, etc., etc. But there it is; it's there in the Torah. The homosexual act is forbidden. Now, as an Orthodox Jew who believes in the principle of the Rambam, of the Maimonides, that the Torah that we have is the Torah that was given, and it was given by the Almighty to Moshe, there is very little wiggle room, as it were, in the interpretation of those verses. There is not much you can do to say that the homosexual act is not forbidden, according to the Torah. Now, if you take this view as an Orthodox Jew, and of course I am speaking to you as from that position, because I do believe in the Rambam's principle that the Torah was given from God to man in its entirety, and what we have is that Torah. You can see what is conspicuous by its absence is any discussion about the people who feel homosexual tendencies. There is nothing that says it is forbidden to feel attraction to the same sex. What it is forbidden is to perform the homosexual act. And there's all sorts of approaches that you can take in terms of being compatible with the 21st century in terms of our approach to people who have homosexual attraction. But which way you try and skin it, the homosexual act, according to traditional Judaism, and I use traditional with a small t as opposed to a large T, traditional Judaism is a forbidden act. Now, the question then is, what should our reaction be? What should Judaism do to deal with? And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean that in a way that means to be sensitive. How can we, as Orthodox Jews, how can we relate our, also given in the Torah that we have to love everybody, you have to love your friend, neighbor like yourself. How is it that we can approach this so that we are not rejecting of people who have homosexual attraction one to the other? Because that has been the society that we, all of us, I think, had in our childhood and youth. Certainly, I can only speak for the United Kingdom. I don't know the laws in the United States, but in the United Kingdom, homosexuality, the homosexual act, was a criminal offence until I think 1967. I think was the time when the law was changed. So in all of our lifetimes, I can't see anybody, I don't think, who was born after 1967, maybe one or two of you who I can't see. But I think most of us were born before 1967. So certainly in our lifetimes, in the 20th century, if not the 21st, in the 20th century, homosexuality was a criminal act. So how is it? And of course, homosexuals were shunned. Homosexuals were so much so that what was the expression that was used to describe somebody who was a homosexual? There were all sorts of pejorative terms, which we don't need to go into, but there was one of them was somebody who was in the closet. And when when they told the world about their sexual orientation, it was called coming out of the closet. Now, why were they in the closet in the first place? Because they had to be, because society shunned them. Now, of course, today in the 21st century, society no longer shuns homosexual people, at least they shouldn't. And of course, well, I mean, it still happens, of course, doesn't it? Because we see racism, we see homophobia, we see anti-Semitism, we see all sorts of behavior, negative behavior towards minority groups, which we shouldn't. But by and large, I think we would all agree that in the 21st century now, in the what are we in? I suppose we're in the third decade now, aren't we, of the 21st century. The attitude of most people to homosexuality is far more accepting, far more tolerant, far more understanding than it was in previous generations. And that, of course, needs to be reflected in Jewish society as well. The problem is that it isn't always the case. I have seen and heard of situations where a homosexual man has not been given an aliyah in shul because he's homosexual. And I, for one, object to that. That's not to say that I condone the homosexual act, which I believe is forbidden by the Torah. But I object to the treatment of people who are homosexual in any other way to anybody who also doesn't do a particular mitzvah in the Torah or who does a particular averah. There are none of us who keep all 613 mitzvot. I happen to have a problem with Lashon Hara. Okay, I happen to have a problem with not gossiping. Okay, many people have that problem. It's not a good problem to have. I don't expect not to be given an aliyah because I speak Lashon Hara. There are other people who don't keep Shabbat. Granted, there are places where they wouldn't get an aliyah either, but I don't accept that either. And so, therefore, what I'm saying is that there has been a distinction in the past made by Jewish society, by society in general, and as a reflection of society in general, Jewish society. There has been a distinction made between a person who does this particular averah in the Torah as opposed to other averot. And this one seems to have been singled out for particular problems. And that, I think, in the 21st century is not compatible with Judaism. Not, so again, let me get this straight what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the homosexual act is permitted by Judaism. I'm not saying that because there is no wiggle room for that. But the discrimination against homosexual people of either gender, whether it's male or female. By the way, there is nothing in the Torah about lesbianism. The rabbis extend the isur, the prohibition from male homosexuality to female homosexuality, but it's not in the Torah. It's a derabanan, it's a rabbinic law. But the discrimination against homosexuals, which general society has in the past and is getting less, needs to be reflected, in my humble opinion, by Jewish society. Now, what Jewish society has done over the centuries is to interpret halakha in different ways. So, for example, the halakha about having more than one wife is very clear in the Torah. It is perfectly permissible for a man to have more than one wife. Along came Rabbeinu Gershom in, I think, around about the 9th century and said, no, we can't, Ashkenazim at least, the Sephardim don't hold by Rabbeinu Gershom, but Rabbeinu Gershom came along and said, no, we're not going to have this anymore. We're going to adapt because society has adapted. And so the halakha has adapted over the years. It's an interpretation which has been dynamic all the way through. And what, in my opinion, we need to do in terms of Judaism is to make a distinction between the act and the person. And we need to be completely and utterly welcoming. There should be no need, there should be absolutely no need for a homosexual minyan, right? You don't find a minyan for Lashon Hara speakers. You don't find a special minyan for Shabbos breakers. You don't find a special minyan for treif eaters. You don't find a special minyan for adulterers or for thieves or for anything else that the Torah prohibits. Why should there be a need? Why should homosexual people feel the need to have their own minyan? And there's only one reason for that, and that's because they're not made welcome in the general synagogues, in the general communities of mainstream Judaism, if you want to call it that. And that is, in my opinion, a tragedy. There should be no need for that kind of, I suppose, separatism. There should be no need. I understand the need for it because they're not made welcome, but they should be made welcome. And that's not to, again, to make a distinction here between the forbidden act of male homosexual act and people who have homosexual attraction to one to another. Whether we go into nurture, nature, all that's not for today. We haven't got time, and it's a debate which is still ongoing, and many people have got strong views one way or the other. Makes no difference what the origin of these feelings are. If people have feelings of attraction to the same gender, then they should not be shunned in any way, in the way that we shouldn't be shunning anybody in the community. We have to be accepting. And the other point I would make is something that I said actually on Shabbat in the drasha, and that is that we are enjoined by the Torah 36 times. Ve'ahavta et hager, you shall love the stranger. You shall not oppress the stranger. Twice in last week's parsha, it tells us, do not oppress the stranger. The word ger, it doesn't just mean somebody who comes from outside, from a different place. It doesn't just mean a convert. It means anybody who is different. Anybody who is different. And why does it say that we should not oppress the stranger? We don't need to be told that. That should be a given. But we're told the reason. Ki gerim heitem be'eretz nochria. You, the Jewish people, were strangers in a strange land. You yourselves were strangers in Egypt, and you should know how it feels to be treated and be ostracized and to be treated badly and to be treated like an outcast. And we, of all people, Jews, should not be treating anybody like an outcast. And those communities that do treat people, whether it's homosexuals or whether it's Sephardim treating Ashkenazim badly, Ashkenazim treating Sephardim badly, men treating women badly, women treating men badly, whatever it is, the other, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you have to love the other like yourself, not push them away. And this, to me, is what authentic Judaism is about. It makes no difference whether it is ostensibly Orthodox, whether it is ostensibly Reformed, Conservative, whatever it is. The Jewish, authentic Jewish way is to accept everybody as they are, without necessarily condoning every action that they do, but not judging their actions. It's not for us to judge. There is only one judge in this world, or not in this world, in another world, and that is the judge above us. It's not for me to judge anybody else. Pirkei Avot says very clearly, the 2nd chapter, the 4th mission, if you want to look it up, do not judge anybody until you come into his place. In other words, until you're stood in his shoes, you do not judge anybody. We are not here to judge individuals. The only people that we should be judging are ourselves. And what we ought to be doing, in my view, and what authentic Judaism says, and I will argue this with anybody, whether it's an Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, ultra-Orthodox, I'm not interested. Authentic Judaism says, Ve'ahavta et hager, you should love the other person. You should love the person who's different. Do not pressurize him. Do not cause him aggravation. Do not reject him. Everybody should be welcome. In authentic Judaism, everybody should be welcome, whatever their orientation, without making distinctions on particular averot. I've gone on for far too long already, but I'm just going to show you one pasuk which gives us the same issue, exactly the same issue with transgenderism, because we have a verse here in two verses actually. one over here that I'm going to show you. Lo yavo ptsua daka o chrut shafcha bikal Hashem. Anybody whose testicles are crushed or removed or cut cannot come into the assembly of the Lord. You are not allowed to remove the testicles. To castrate a human being is not permitted, and therefore somebody who is a transgender person has, again, no wiggle room, I'm afraid. But that doesn't mean that we reject the person. We have difficulties, more difficulties in that regard, but it's only the same difficulties that society is grappling with now. How do they deal with transgender? I was reading in the one of the papers the other day about this lady who used to be a man who's now winning all the swimming titles because she is now competing as a woman, etc. And nobody knows how to deal with this. We're still feeling our way here with this. And Judaism very, very often lags behind society in its the way it treats these people. But the concept remains the same. The concept remains the fact that we should be welcoming to everybody. We should be making no distinction between anybody's sexual orientation, whilst at the same time recognizing that Orthodox Judaism, and in my opinion, authentic Judaism, does not permit the act itself. So I will get off my soapbox right now and open it up to questions, comments from anybody in the audience.